was muted, sorry. It's 4:30 and we have 3 directors on, and hoping that Andrew can rejoin us, but I'd like to call the meeting to order at this point and have the secretary please call the roll.
Okay, hang on, I was making sure we were recording.
Oh, sorry, I should have given you a little notice.
Oh, that's okay. Okay, I think we're good. President Mason.
Present.
Vice President Lassane.
Present.
Director Mitchell. Director Byrd.
Present.
Director Nichols. He was here just a minute ago.
Do you have his cell phone number that maybe you could just send him a text and see if he's able to rejoin?
You bet.
Although it's the flag salute, and I think you're the one that helps us with that too.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay. This is odd, saying the Pledge of Allegiance to a computer.
I brought in a flag so that everybody could see it. Oh, good. Oh, good.
Okay. Shall we start?
Yes, ma'am.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the
United
United
States
States
of
of
America,
America,
and to the
to the
republic
republic for which it
which
stands,
stands
one
one
nation
nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty.
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Oh, you know what? I did the roll call before the flag salute. I'm backwards today. Sorry about that. We will move on to the adoption of the agenda. Dr. Salzman, may you please introduce this afternoon's agenda?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening. Tonight's agenda contains the superintendent's report, a segment for board comments, segment for public comments, segment for routine business, a segment for information discussion items, and upcoming agenda items. Since publishing the agenda, the following changes have been made. Item 9.02, personnel report was updated with a new hire and a new retirement. And item 11.03, the coronavirus updates. Continuity of support to the presentation was added. And item 14.02, regular meeting May 5th, 2020, change was made to the contents for the agenda for May 5th. The board may elect to change order of business for majority vote of the members. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Do any directors wish to, is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed, no. The agenda is adopted. That takes us to recognition, and given the nature of our meeting tonight, there are no recognitions. So we will move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Salzman.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. Good evening, everybody. And to our public, again, I wish everybody blessings during this time and safety. Tonight, you're going to be hearing a presentation of the update of our coronavirus plan, as we call it, and to make sure that all students are getting engaged in the learning. So you're going to hear everything that we've done so far up to this time. Also, we are going to be sending out a survey to our parents tomorrow, to our community, to get their feedback on how we're doing during this time. It's very important to us that we get your feedback through our communications webpage. There's a short survey, and it's very important that we ask the community to fill out this survey as we take the feedback. It is Spirit Week this week in our district, and it's a different time when it comes to Spirit Week. We just want to engage our community, our youngsters, to just to come back and feel good for something during spring break and during these times. And this is to really benefit our students. Tomorrow, I'll be having a Zoom with the senior class. and it's a chance for me to speak to them about this crisis and where they're at. And as we plan with our community, and we're going to have some parent groups and people meeting to figure out how and what commencement would look like. But it's my chance for that time just to check in with seniors and to be candid with them. I want to publicly thank the Board of Directors for their outstanding work during this time. To our public, this is a lot of patience and a lot of planning, and our elected officials have done an amazing job, starting with our board, to really have patience during this time as we plan. I want to publicly thank the Cabinet for their outstanding job. Working from home is quite different, and but we're rolling out good things for our students and staying ahead of the curve, not only in the state of Washington, but nationally. And to our outstanding teachers, this is different work, and they've stepped up to the plate to perform and to reach out to our community in so many ways, but they're delivering instruction. Publicly, I'd like to thank two teachers, Ms. Johansson and Mr. Pappas, two outstanding teachers that continue to Zoom with two youngsters that I know quite well, and they're getting instruction as we speak today, and every day they've been touching with their teachers. So I want to publicly thank them with every other teacher in our district, and to the entire Everett Public School family. Outstanding work is being done, and I thank you for all your efforts. This is monumental. This is different. There will be a light at the end of the tunnel. I can assure everybody that. But during this process, I commend everybody that has worked side by side with all of us to get this done. Thank you. That is my report this evening.
Thank you. I forgot I'm muted. I'm trying to stay muted when I'm not speaking.
Sure.
Get background noise. Thank you so much for the recognition, and also for recognizing those that are really making all of this happen. It is very unusual in different times. Directors, would you, we're going to move to board comments, section 7.0, and Director Lassane, do you have anything to share?
Yes, I would like to. I've had the opportunity of speaking with a couple of families in my neighborhood. Usually it's from across the street, but we've managed to keep our social distancing. But I can assure you that parents are having a challenging time out there with teaching, doing homeschooling for those parents that are actually staying home and that aren't going to work. And I do know it's very challenging for some of them. Some of them are not having a problem because their kids are older, but especially the kids that are younger. They're now realizing how difficult our teachers and how hard our teachers work every day with a classroom filled of 25 kids, and they just have their one or two. So I do understand that it is difficult for parents. I like the idea of having a survey so we can see what additional supports or resources we might be able to give our parents because they are having difficult times. So that'll be very helpful to hear what they have to say. The other thing I would like to comment about is I had the opportunity of spending an hour on a Zoom conference yesterday with WASDA as they go over key things that are affecting or will affect our students. Some of the conversations dealt with special ed, some dealt with seniors and what they have to go through. Parent and community perceptions was another thing that that came up during the conversation. What the state is doing as far as waiving some requirements for seniors, as well as just in general, some of the changes we're doing online learning. And I think we are one of the districts that are much further ahead, and I'm very happy to sit in in the midst of those administrators who made these things happen. So I'd like to thank you all for doing those hard things and making sure our kids had what was necessary to keep learning. So it is a challenge out there for our parents, and I look forward to hearing from that survey. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, we have Director Nichols has joined us, and I'm going to give the mic over to Director Berg at this point.
Thank you. I just want to echo everything that's been said so far. Our teaching staff, our district staff, everyone's been doing an outstanding job, and I can't thank everyone enough. Sitting on those WASDA calls, like Pam said, twice a week has been wonderful because we can talk with school board directors from all over the state and listen to best practices and challenges. So that's been really helpful. But really, I think for me, the last few weeks, talking directly with our parents and with the folks in our community, it's been really helpful to understand some of their challenges. We're of course having our own challenges being a district family and having two kiddos kind of navigate this new world. But I've had the opportunity for about 3 hours per week the last few weeks to volunteer at a local food bank. And so keeping my safe distance as folks come and drop off food, it's been really eye-opening to hear some of the challenges and honestly some of the opportunities. So I think that survey will be excellent to be able to get the feedback directly from our parents about what's going on in their world of school, because right now we're all individually schooling. I do want to give a really big, wonderful shout out to, again, all the teachers, but just some of the innovation that I've seen in our own household. Just to give you an example, our French teacher, Madam Wendy Organ over at Jackson, she did a French scavenger hunt the other day via Zoom. And so imagine your high schooler running around the house, grabbing toilet papers and frying pans and everything else. And you hear all these kids in the background laughing and having a fabulous time and learning in a new way. So I just want to thank her and thank all the teachers that are being so creative with their lessons and their lesson plans, and let you guys know that it really is meaningful to not only me as a director, but also as a parent. So thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing that. And Director Nichols, would you like to comment this evening?
Just in the interest of time, I'll go ahead and let us move on.
Okay. I don't have anything new to say because there certainly are just a lot of thank yous out there. The WASDA calls have been helpful. I think several of us has been participating on those, and it is a good connection for us. You know, typically these these minutes are filled with the activities that we've been doing out in the community, and that is not the case right now. So it's a lot of neighborly conversations on walks and getting the pulse from friends and such over the telephone. So it's been different, but it's been good. And I just have to say, I have received so much positive feedback on what we're doing in terms of supporting families and students, and really just also the basic needs, I think, is some of the most crucial stuff that we're doing that we got going right out of the gate. So the learning piece takes a little longer to figure out, but everyone's working on it. So we'll get there. And we'll be stronger in the end once we're done. So there'll be some good things to come out of this. Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to public comments. And are there any public comments to be? There's Darlene.
Let me just one more time double check the email, but there wasn't anything when the meeting started.
Okay.
No, I have no public comment.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to 9.0, which is the consent agenda. And Dr. Salzman, may you please provide an overview of tonight's consent agenda?
Yes, ma'am. The board's consent agenda includes repetitive business items such as meeting minutes, personnel actions, expense vouchers, surplus lists, gifts, grants, and recurring contracts. Sometimes it includes items that occur less frequently, part of a routine business nature. These items are usually viewed by the board in the Friday report 1 or more weeks before the board meeting. This gives directors time to ask staff questions or to consider discussion about the policy implications of those items. The board votes on the consent agenda in a single motion By its definition, the consent agenda is not debatable. In the case of this consent agenda, the superintendent's office has received no questions or comments regarding these items. Therefore, the consent agenda is presented as published for board approval.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Would any director like to remove an item from the consent agenda and place it in new business section of the agenda? Hearing none, we will move to a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say no.
Aye.
The consent agenda is approved. Which takes us to strategic progress monitoring. And tonight we do not have an item for strategic progress monitoring. So we'll move to information and discussion. And this evening we have 11.01 second quarter financial update. And I will turn that over to Jeff Moore to provide an overview.
Thank you very much. I believe everybody can hear me okay, correct?
Yes.
Okay. In brevity, I think if you look at, and I'm going to open the screen, in the agenda item, this, of course, is retrospective. And let me see, share. Okay. So I'm going to run through this pretty quickly because you're going to see a pretty typical pattern amongst all funds and reserve questions to the end, should there be any. And I'll start off with, sorry, I'm trying to figure out why this isn't advancing. There we go. Typical upfront information. I think if you look at our general fund, what you'll see in this slide really is a bump in enrollment relative to the Promise K program. And as we look to the future, obviously we're not reporting enrollment to the extent beyond the March 1. And you will find that the state is going to extrapolate based upon prior years to continue in our funding stream. So we are on target, and our revenue stream is solid for this year. Similarly, if we look at our total revenues by month, they again are following a standard pattern. Remember that in October, the reason why it looks like our revenues are somewhat lower is because 2019 is our low point from when they cut the levy before they had some restoration. And you'll see that future years that revenue will be higher. So we're on a typical revenue pattern. When we look at our expenditures by month, it looks a little odd, but also recall the scale of this drawing. This is the year in which we initiated the new account code structure. So the processing of expenditures, it looks like we caught up in November and then followed sort of an unusual pattern, but they are normal for the year and on track at this point. So again, we continue to project an ending fund balance of about 8.9%. I will just give you a peek into the future. We don't have enough information, but we know that we will be there or possibly higher than that at the end of the year. More to come in the future. So now I'm just going to move into the other funds quickly. You can see this is a capital fund, and you're looking at our revenues, and some of the unusual activity there really has to do with the capital levy. And if you recall, in the first 2 years of the 2016 capital levy, we assessed 19 million each of the first 2 years to get the one-to-one program up and going. And now you can see the result of that lowering down. November and February really have to do with when the capital program receives some state match funds. So again, this fund is operating as you would expect for the year. Likewise, the total appropriations. Remember that in August, when you look at the expenditures, that we are now required to take all of the September share expenditures for capital projects and put them in August. So it makes it odd, but we continue to operate that fund at a level that is expected. As you can see, that continues to show true with our total fund balance at about 60 million. When we pass the 2020 bond, we'll see these overall figures increase, but certainly we're at a normal pattern for the capital fund as well. Debt service fund, we did make larger debt service payments in 2019. When our levy revenues declined, we paid off early on principal and interest, and that's why you see higher payments for that year. It should again return to the normal pattern that you saw in the 2 prior years following this year. And then finally, the ASB fund, it seems to be on track to normal years. We saw a revenue increase for a couple of reasons. One, it just seemed to be timing. This is pre-COVID, but this is when some uniforms were purchased, and also some of these fundraisers that had built up fund balances for these major trips we've been dealing with, whether they're New York or wherever they may go out of state. So again, we see that as a normal pattern for the ASB fund. And our transportation vehicle fund, of course, is a small fund, and we buy buses, and it's normal for this time of year as well. And with that, that concludes the financial report in brevity.
Thank you. I have a question, just in looking at the capital projects fund. I'm not actually familiar with what our future spending looks like in terms of capital projects. And I know that's maybe more of a Mike Gunn question, but are we still continuing with our projects, and do we anticipate continuing with planned projects into the summertime?
I will defer to Mike on the capital project planning, but
yes, I'll go ahead and answer that. The answer is absolutely. We are heading into, well, we're completing the North Middle School project. There's still some work on the tennis courts and the track. The big project right now is Woodside Elementary School. We're right in the middle of that modernization project. We're also doing a roof this summer. We're going to do some flooring projects. We're moving, I think, about 12 portable classrooms. We're doing some HVAC upgrades. So we are absolutely continuing actively our construction program this summer.
Okay. So our projections aren't really that interrupted on the capital projects fund by the shutdown of schools or the disruption that we're in right now.
That's correct.
Okay. Do any other directors have any questions?
I do have a question regarding the ASB fund with the situation with Jackson High and their trip to New York. Has that trip been canceled, or is that trip still going forward, or we just don't know yet?
That was my question, just to chime in. And Pam, we've been notified that it's canceled and that they'll get back to us about our money. So I had the exact same question.
we are in the process of negotiating with the travel agency, the vendors, the theaters that they work with have not necessarily canceled programs. And so we are actively working to represent all those families in the best ability we can without a gift of public funds issue to recover and provide those funds back to those families.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions regarding the financial report? Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Okay, so that takes us to 11.02, board annual goals 2019 to 20 progress report.
So I'll go ahead and introduce that one, I guess. Just a little bit of background on this. Every year since 2010, the board has approved annual goals for itself during its summer workshop or sometimes immediately after that. The board goals for the current year were developed this last summer in August. And this was right after, within about a month or so after Dr. Salzman started with the district, and just prior to 2 new board members coming on. Directors Berg and Nichols came on afterwards. So just a little bit of history on this. These board goals are based on standards provided to school districts across the state by WASDA. And it's to serve as a guide to help school boards understand and apply common principles of good governance. So the purpose of the agenda item tonight is to allow the board an opportunity to review a draft goals report that was prepared by the cabinet and the superintendent, and for the board to make changes to it if it wants to. And so as you can see from the attachment, I don't have anything to put up on the screen, but on the attachment, there is a copy of the progress report, and it shows on there the board goals for the year. There are 13 of them. And the cabinet and the superintendent discussed where we thought the progress was, and we have indicated that in by colored circles. So generally, the green circle means that we believe the board is on track for completion this year with that goal. If it's yellow, it means some progress has been made, but more is needed. And then you don't have any that are red, but if you did, it would mean that we think it might be difficult to complete the task this year. So this is provided for the board's discussion, consideration. The 2 items that are in yellow were those directly related to the bond proposal, and then also to community and family engagement. And both of those were severely impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. And so that's why we put those in yellow. So at this point, I'll stand down and leave it for the board for discussion.
Okay, thank you. So directors, do you have any questions or any comments regarding the colors of progress that's been made on the goals themselves?
I have a question for Mike. This is Pamela Singh. And what I'd like to ask is, as a result of the COVID-19, I know our focus was just on the capital bond as well as community engagement. But when I look at, especially, and not that standards 1 and 2 won't apply, but I look at standards 3 and standards 4 as well, as far as creating conditions for district-wide for student and staff success as a result of going to online learning in the latter part of this year. Are we at the time in which we need to modify our goals and focus in on how we have had to modify conditions for student success, as well as holding the school district accountable for meeting student learning expectations because of the COVID-19 in the latter part, the whole latter part of 2019-2020 year? Should we see and modify some of our goals and request progress reports on what we're doing along the lines of online learning and professional development for online learning and things along those lines as they relate to STEM and career connected and student improvements and all of those things in those particular categories?
Well, I'll share my thoughts on that. I think that there's not a great opportunity to revise goals, and I'm not exactly sure how that would look if we chose to do that at this point in time, because the situation that we're in is so fluid. We do know at this point that students won't be back in our school buildings, but I think that the goal of supporting staff and supporting students to the best of our ability is one that actually it doesn't go away. It just looks very different. And it's
Right.
also the accountability of that learning looks very different right now. And so I would hesitate to create new goals around a COVID-19 scenario when in fact we don't even really understand the scenario itself. And then to follow up and to your point, I think it is very important that we continue to monitor. And as a matter of fact, the next item on our agenda, as you will see, is a progress update on student learning.
Right, but we can put that progress report as being part and parcel of what our continued effort is going to be throughout the remaining part of the year as it, you know, in our goals. I mean, standard 3 and 4 especially focus in on what we're going to be doing. So why not include as our progress report? Because next generation status report and contracts agreement for college and high school CTE dual credits. So you can also say in the face of COVID-19, what are we doing about those things? In the face of COVID-19, how are we doing surveys to, you know, for effectiveness? How are we doing, you know, all of those things relate to it and makes it more meaningful as far as how the board's goals have modified and changed and I guess you say morphed into something a little bit more than what we intended because of the condition that we're in. I mean, for us not to change because of the condition we are in essentially says that our goals for the years never changed, and we know they have.
I would agree with Director Lassane, and I'm not sure what best way is to track it, but when I look at this, it represents business as usual, and it's not business as usual. And so I think if there's a way to reflect that, maybe not so much as changing our goals, but changing our progress, much in the way you changed it with the capital bond, just to reflect the reality. But at least it will show that it's just, even in the way that we assess our own progress as directors and as a board, it's just not business as usual. Because I think, and I looked through the next report, I think we are going to see some innovative ways to connect students in some alternative learning environments, but just to have our progress report look like, oh yeah, it's green, everything's fine, nothing's really changed in the last couple of months. It's probably, there's got to be a way to capture the changes and capture what's been going on. And so maybe there are a bunch of yellows, which isn't bad. It just means that, yep, we're in the process of figuring out how this works.
Okay, Andrew, do you have any thoughts on that? Oops, I think you're muted.
Not that it's terribly salient. I was having a little trouble following what Pam was saying, but I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other on it.
Maybe could I provide a little bit of context here for this report? I wasn't directly involved in the development of this, but I have certainly seen and worked with these over many years. The board goals, as stated here, are fairly strategic level. And I was thinking of two of them in particular. Standard board goals 2A is to monitor instructional planning and implementation. And then the other one I was thinking of is to monitor student learning improvement progress. Those are fairly high level goals. They wouldn't change necessarily based on COVID-19. What changes, I think, is the way the district responds to what is happening. And so your responsibilities as a board to monitor implementation and progress does not go away. But what might change more than the goal set would be the actual board agenda items that you will be seeing over the course of time. That is going to look a lot different right now than it would have 2 months ago. So I guess I'm saying that I think that the work that you do on a day-to-day basis may well look a lot different, but it doesn't, to me anyway, mean that the goal set has to change right now.
I don't really think the goals would change, but the goal progress reporting changes. Just like we put in that one standard 3 rescinded due to COVID-19 pandemic.
Mhm.
In that goal progress report, we include some of the reports that we have received and that will be developed, and as to the changes in what has happened because of COVID-19.
Yeah.
So that it makes it clear that things just haven't stayed the same, that we have modified and we have changed the goal progress reporting on that as a result of the fact that there hasn't been any school for the second half of the year. And that's a long period of time. And I think we can't remain all green as a result of this pandemic for the year. I mean, some of the reporting and what we've done will change as a result of this pandemic. And so to end the year with all green, and the only thing that comes up is the bond because of the COVID-19 and community engagement as a result of COVID-19, to me, it doesn't sound like it's realistic. Something changed as a result of what we're going through. And we have to change as a result of that too, to support our goals. The school board standard and the school board goals, they can stay the same, but the progress reporting on that and what we have to do in order to meet our goals, those things, they have to have changed.
There doesn't really appear to be, much that would change within these anyways, because what I'm seeing here is most of these goals were met earlier in the year. Outside of the things like the bond and the COVID-19 outreach, most of it is done already, or we're on track to achieving it. So while I agree that if something is directly impacted, it should be changed, I'm not seeing a lot here that's been missed. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but
I think what might be helpful is to have Director Lassane and Director Berg take a look at these goals and help us more specifically understand what that might look like as you go through these goals, and provide that information. Who would they provide that to? Mike Gunn?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. That perhaps
provide it to the superintendent and to me.
Okay.
Okay.
And then CC me as well, because at this point, this is it's just a check-in on our goals. So,
and just to give you an idea of what I was looking at, and I'll put it in an email. But like for a monitor student learning improvement progress, and so what it looks like it's captured, at least to me, is that it's captured what we've done, which is accurate. But I think there would be some understanding that we're continuing to do that. Like we don't just do our IRs at the beginning of the year and just say done, right? Like, because that's a continuous process. So we would leave that there. It's totally green right now, but it's just from now forward, it might be yellow. So maybe that little circle looks half green, half yellow. So now it's like, oh, we're in this new world. And so there's a new way that we're monitoring progress, and it's a TBD or it's something else. But I just think, to Pam's point, when I look at this chart, and if I'm a citizen, I go, oh yeah, everything's perfect, everything's fine, there's not been any changes or impact. And really, when you look at what's reported under goal progress report, it's really just kind of a saying what we've done. But I don't think the intention was that's all we'll do. And since we're doing different things at this point in the year, we might want to capture that especially for folks looking at, you know, kind of taking this apart later saying, hey, what did you guys do in the midst of this pandemic in terms of learning, and what changes did you make? Not just, oh, you've established or put in writing everything you did up until that point, and then everything else, nothing is even, it would be accounted for, if that makes sense. I'll put that in writing, but that's kind of where my brain is heading, is that we just need to accurately show that something has changed about how we're delivering on these board goals.
I think that makes sense. And I think, you know, to Director Nichols' point, it's not so much that I think the goals are changing. I just think the goal progress report piece of it needs some additional information in there. So that will be something to work toward as we move toward the end of the year here. And if you do have specific ideas, I think it would be good to share that.
I wouldn't mind sharing some of my ideas with Mike and let him look at them, and so that we can capture some of those ideas to him.
Okay.
Great.
Any further questions or discussion? Okay, then I think, now I made an error a little bit ago when we were way back in comments section 7.0, and I forgot to ask our student representative if they had anything to share, and I think we would all love to hear a few words from a student that is going through this process on the other side. I mean, would you be willing to share a few struggles and successes and how your peers are feeling?
Yeah, of course. So for my school, we're really reminding students to do your work and homework just to make sure that we lessen that education gap that's gonna grow between the few states that are in school right now and out of school right now. And many juniors and seniors are worried, but the reassurance that came from the community and the school and even College Board is really, it really inspires people to do their work at home and have a whole community that's going to back them up when they go to college or if they're planning to go to college.
Thank you. I will say, as a parent of a senior, the colleges have done a really exceptional job of reaching out. Of course, it's not quite the same as doing a campus tour,
Yeah.
but they've really gotten creative on how to do it virtually. So we have appointments set up this week to sit down in front of a computer and go on virtual tours and talk to staff and talk to students and such. So it's kind of interesting. They're being connected from both sides, which I really appreciate.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I apologize for missing that earlier. See, I can see you at the end of the row there. Okay, with that said, we're going to move on to 11.03, which is our coronavirus update and the support that we're providing to students and staff for the continued learning. And I believe Dana Riley Black and Peter Scott are going to provide the overview here.
Yes, thank you very much. Hope you all can hear me. Good evening, everybody. Hope everybody's well. And can you give me a thumbs up if you can see the on the screen? Okay, perfect. So our purpose here tonight in the next 20 or so minutes is to provide an overview of the teaching and learning iterations. And we think that term iteration is really appropriate for a system that keeps evolving over time and looking at community responses, sort of the end user student response and experience, like we just heard from Amina, for example, and to get a little bit more information about the system-wide structures that we'd like to add to the school day coming up here next week. We'd also like to review guiding questions and answers specific to implications for the graduating class of 2020 and some current grading parameters that we've communicated and continue to communicate with information from OSPI and other agencies. and then briefly check in regarding ongoing food distribution, childcare, and technology support, and a bit on the food pantry situation as well. So real briefly, the idea that we are resonating with that idea of a continuous improvement model, constantly iterating, believing that something can always get better. This comes from the founder of Facebook, in the idea of when you build something this complex with moving parts, that nothing is really ever complete. But we are engaging as a community in this continuous improvement cycle. You all are familiar with this version 1.0, which was shared at the study session on the 17th, which followed the first introduction of this model prior to the first day of closure on March 16th. So teachers saw this in a webinar on March 13th. And we landed our definitions of student engagement and learning support, really marked by 4 areas. And you can see them there: scaffolding, providing students and families access, collaborating with colleagues, and high quality professional learning. And that sort of optimal zone was somewhere in between. You can see sort of the bookends of where we felt that optimal zone was at the time. And at the time, receiving guidance from OSPI and the Office of Civil Rights with equity in mind, making sure that what we provide in terms of online instruction to some students, it must be accessible to all students. And so we sort of approximated our strategy relative to that in calling it version 1.0. Version 2.0 you read about in the Friday report in late March. The idea that 2 important documents, and I won't spend too much time going deep on the 2 important documents that helped influence our shift, and in fact, many other districts shifts to a version 2.0 as we iterated. On March 21st, which was a Saturday, the Office of Civil Rights made a clear statement that ensuring compliance with the Individuals with Disabilities Act and Section 504 should not prevent any school from offering educational programs through distance instruction. And then 2 days later, OSPI published guiding principles for districts in providing K-12 instruction and student supports. So we were already in a really good position, very well positioned on Tuesday the 24th, so the day later than OSPI's announcement, essentially, or those resources that they put out on the 23rd, in communicating to staff a shift to a more active engagement where students and teachers enter the teaching and learning cycle remotely by leveraging technology, accessing learning resources. And we communicated those shifts, again, to our staff on the 24th and our parents on the 26th of March. So that's just a brief history of, again, this iteration. And I'm going to hand it off to Dr. Dana Riley-Black and come back in a bit talking about the new proposed structures.
Thanks. As Dr. Scott just shared, our system has been asked to shift to a what and a how that is new to most, if not everyone. As such, the educators in our district will be required or are being required to receive opportunities for ongoing professional development. The CRC educators, that is directors and facilitators from curriculum, assessment, categorical, student services, MTSS, and the learning management system teams have and will continue to offer professional development opportunities to certificated staff. On a weekly basis, professional development offerings are posted to the staff website. These offerings are informed by teacher input, a recent survey to principals, as well as the recommendations from the OSPI's Continuous Learning 2020 document. As we move to implement the teaching and learning structures, which Dr. Scott will introduce in upcoming slides, the core professional development will focus on 4 key areas: the what, or the content, the how, or the modalities of instruction in our distance learning environment, the modes of communication, and wrapped around all professional development, social emotional learning. Next slide, please. Now more than ever, social emotional learning is fundamental to all of our work. And as we move forward, SEL will inform all professional development. On a weekly basis, the Student Services and MTSS teams will offer a new SEL professional development module. The week prior, the module will be provided to CRC educators with the intent that these directors and facilitators infuse SEL learning into their respective professional development offerings. In this way, we will model how SEL is not an extra or an add-on, but fundamental to all of our work. Next slide, please. The curriculum team is in the process of developing priority snapshots to support each grade level and content area. A priority snapshot outlines the priority standards and enduring concepts of a content for the completion of this particular school year. The document aligns the priority standards to the district adopted instructional materials and/or materials and resources recommended by the OSPI. The intent of this information is to provide teachers with the foundations for backwards planning for instruction. These priority snapshots will be the core focus of content-related professional development. Next slide. As you are aware, devices have been widely distributed to our students throughout the district. To ensure effective use of the devices, we continue to support teachers in their capacity and fluency in use of technology. Brian Beckley's Learning Management Systems team has and continues to offer a strong portfolio of well-intended professional development offerings. These professional development options align to teachers' experience, from introduction to the basics of a digital platform, to strategies for content delivery and integration with other tools and resources. Next slide. And finally, more than ever, communication with students and families is a priority. As needed, professional development options include the modes of communication, such as use of Zoom and email, as well as supports from Dr. Chad Golden's categorical team with the options of translation services. Next slide.
Okay, as we continue to iterate, particularly in light of the governor's announcement last Monday for school closures for the remainder of the school year, we are developing additional structures to improve the learning experiences and families. And the North Star, so to speak, that are guiding our conversations about building these structures out and communicating them rather, is doing our very best with the resources that we have to serve each student and family. And as Dana mentioned, ensuring that the health and social emotional well-being of our students and families, staff, colleagues, ourselves, our entire community really is at the forefront. And then staying on that productive edge of learning, avoiding that frustration level of learning, but staying on that productive edge of learning and leveraging our resources. The guiding questions about structures in terms of the why structures and why now, really come down to two areas really. The supporting sufficient structure to improve predictability in a time of uncertainty for our students and families, and then offering support for routines at home. So we believe if we're providing that sufficient structure, it will minimize stress and maximize social emotional well-being. Will also strengthen those support systems between home and school. For our staff-facing view and rationale, exploring multiple ways to leverage technology resources and grow professionally and in collaboration with their colleagues, and bridging that gap between students and teachers in ways that educators know best. A question about what do special education services look like in this environment. Our commitment remains to continue to develop programming that provides the level of progress expected for other students in light of these school closures. Just like we haven't replicated the physical classroom, we're not replicating special services or related services per se, but rather special education related service providers have been actively providing student engagement and learning supports. All special ed and related service staff members were trained on these supports and receive weekly professional development in job-alike groups to assist them with engaging students and families. similar to the meeting the needs of other students across the district. We continue to hold remote IEP or individualized education plan team meetings and evaluation meetings via Zoom and phone. And this upcoming week, all of our special education teachers and related service providers, like our occupational therapists, when we say related service, we mean physical therapists, occupational speech and language professionals, they will be trained on building continuous learning plans with each of their students. It's important to note that this plan is not an IEP amendment, and it does not replicate or replace the current IEP. Rather, it's a plan for the provision of special education and related services during school closures. So over the next several weeks, this is a big, heavy lift. Staff will be developing and implementing those plans with families of the almost 3,000 students who receive services. So, this is about the most tactical set of slides that we have here, and I'm going to go fairly quickly through these. Some guiding questions about the structures themselves and what happens in the learning zone, and perhaps you had time to look at these structures here. We're going to start with the elementary structures and a teacher view here. So what really happens in the learning zone? I'm going to go briefly in giving you a description of the student contact or IEP participation, specialist time, team department time, and elective PD time there. So the idea that in this teacher view, this is what a teacher would approach his or her day. That team department time starting out the day where teacher teams collaborate, develop content, revisit instructional calendars. The learning zone I'm going to come back to in a second because I'm going to go deeper there. The specialist time there you see on the other end of the student lunch break, and the student lunch break also being a mental and physical break and large enough for siblings to go to the lunch distribution sites. We knew that that was important to keep continuity and commonalities across all levels. That student help IEP participation, think about this as a differentiated outreach for students, collaborating between general ed and special ed colleagues and working on the IEP team business. The elective PD at the end of the day is where a teacher may choose to, as an individual or as a member of a team, engage in elective based on the needs of the teachers or the team. And there's some really, really innovative and exciting PD offered, and wow, are the teachers really taking advantage of that. Thousands of folks are engaged in those sessions, and we've got a graph at the end here to describe that. The purpose of the job alike convenings in that same time slot will be to discuss content and practice with job alike colleagues, convened by a curriculum director, a facilitator, or a specialist at a previous time, so folks could reach out and receive a real-time support. So back to that learning zone. This is sort of the meat of the plan here, and this is a range of ways teachers could be engaging. I'm not going to read all of those bullets there, but you can see that there's quite a wide range there, from posting daily or weekly schedule of lessons, communicating in asynchronous, which is sort of in different times throughout the window, or synchronous environments where there may be a two-way communication, a live Zoom conference where there's active teachers and students are actively engaged in the teaching and learning cycle. The assignment of independent work, holding of office hours, and again, that concept of the spirit of differentiated outreach in individual small group assistance. And you can see on the right-hand side what the students should be doing or how they're going to be actively engaged in the learning zone. And then even outside the learning zone, that belief that learning is a continuous process and should happen throughout the school, throughout the day, and can be student and family initiated in addition to teacher assigned. We again think that it's important to leverage our technology tools like iReady, for example, and then exercise, that idea of getting out, taking breaks for physical and mental health. the sort of the commensurate example or that parallel example between what the teacher view is and what a sample daily schedule might be like for a family, and this is an elementary school example, you can see in those same time slots, there's those parallel engagement. And so I won't go through all of these pieces here, but this would be communicated to families as a suggested or recommended structure, again, in order to provide predictability and routines in the home. This is just, again, same sort of areas of focus here. This just happens to be the high school structures. I didn't include a middle school structures for the sake of time, but we do have specific middle school structures. And again, they're parallel parent view there. The important features here in the secondary level for both middle and high school is that there are 2 touch points per period per week. So the idea that a student, there'd be predictability about when he or she should be engaging in a particular content area, and helping the teachers with efficiencies so that they're not all trying to engage kids at the same time and overwhelming the student with 2 or 3 or 4 Zoom invitations, for example. So that this just creates more of that dance rather than the stepping on each other's toes, to use a metaphor. And you can see that this would be a high school sample family view that matches or corresponds with the daily schedule for teachers. Our next steps, as mentioned earlier, our target effective date would be to launch these structures on Monday the 20th, and then sharing with teachers and classified staff tomorrow morning, April 15th, and then sharing a modified version in a communication with families the afternoon of Wednesday the 15th. Now I'm going to hand this off to Dr. Kathy Woods, who will provide an overview of the grad requirements and a bit about grading.
All right, thank you, Dr. Scott. In just a few minutes here, I'm going to talk about graduation requirements for this year's seniors, the emergency rules that were established by the State Board of Education to ensure access to our seniors to graduation, our district's practices around grading and feedback during the closure, and then a quick update on advanced placement exams. So for the class of 2020, the graduation requirements, they need to accumulate 22 credits, 17 of those in core requirements, some of those in electives, and then our district has a college and career readiness requirement of a half a credit. They also need to meet standard in math and English language arts in a graduation pathway. Used to be the SBA or an alternative, and now there are multiple pathways to get there. And they also must complete a high school and beyond plan. Go ahead to the next slide. The State Board of Education, after the legislature passed right at the end of their session emergency legislation to allow the State Board to enact some emergency rules so that districts had some flexibility to waive student credit requirements. The State Board of Education adopted these emergency rules April 8th, so they've been moving very fast. What we are doing is each district has the opportunity to apply for authorization to waive individual students' credit requirements. This is not a blanket waiver for everybody in the class gets certain requirements met. It is in fact for individual students. As Director Lassane talked earlier about WASDA, they are preparing guidance regarding policy changes needed, and in fact, they published them late this afternoon. This waiver will expire July 31st, and it provides flexibility of certain credits required for graduation so that we can waive them, provided that these things are enacted. Districts have to make a good faith effort to address core course requirements and credit deficiencies. I will explain what the definition of good faith effort is in a couple of minutes. And students need to be on track to graduate with the class of 2020. And again, that definition is fairly specific. Go ahead to the next slide. So the things that can be waived, there is a limit on the number of credits waived, but that varies per student. It's based on what the student was enrolled in or what they were reasonably planning to complete by the end of the 2020 school year. By state law, the end of the school year is defined as August 31st. of the year, so it can go into the summer. The waived graduation requirement credits might include both core credit graduation requirements and those elective or flexible credit graduation requirements. And that's new, that we could waive core credits. Okay, go ahead to the next slide. Here are some things that the waiver does not do. It does not address potential impacts on earlier grades, so 9th, 10th, 11th graders, or those students graduating after this school year. The legislation was very specific to those students who were on track to graduate this school year, and so that's the only thing addressed in this emergency, in these emergency rules. However, the state board is aware that they may need to address this for future classes. The waiver does not apply to local graduation requirements. We already have the right to waive those things. We can waive the college and career readiness seminar for individual students and the senior quantitative requirement, for example. And this waiver is not used to address missed hours and days for public schools. The authority for addressing the hours and days is with OSPI and not with the state board. So they'll be providing guidance on that. Go ahead to the next slide. It also does not waive the other graduation requirements, the non-credit requirements, including the graduation pathway options and the high school and beyond plan. If a student hasn't met their pathway yet, they could be eligible for the expedited assessment appeal waiver, where they apply to a college or some post-secondary learning institution, and when they are admitted to that institution, we can send that letter of admission to OSPI, and they can be granted a waiver for the pathway, for the graduation pathway for math and or English language arts. We anticipate that more students will need to access this expedited appeal process this year because of the cancellation of testing and other issues due to closures. The high school and beyond plan, which is a requirement, we have that well in hand. The students and teachers have been working on that. It's online, and our teachers, success coordinators, and counselors are working with students, and we don't believe that will be a barrier. And again, the waiver only applies to this year's seniors, not students in grades 9, 10, and 11. Okay. Okay, I said I'd tell you these definitions. Good faith effort. You often hear this talking to students. You guys need to make a good faith effort, but the state rules really have to do with the district making a good faith effort. That means that we're engaging each student and awarding credit where possible rather than waiving credit. Waiving of core graduation credit requirements is a last resort, not the first thing we do. So we want them to complete their enrolled courses. And then we need to provide other opportunities to earn credit, competency-based credit, course equivalency, credit recovery, those sorts of options. Our district already provides many of those options for students, and we're anticipating offering more, particularly in competency-based credit. And then we must use our authority to waive local requirements prior to using the state waiver. We also need to consider equity in implementing the waiver, make sure that we're keeping track of any disparate outcomes, and along the way, change our plans so that we can mitigate any disparate outcomes for different groups of students. And we must keep accurate records of waived credits for each student for reporting purposes. You can go ahead to the next slide. The other specific definition was the on track to graduate, which means that the student has either involves the student's completed credits and those courses they're enrolled in that would allow them to meet the state graduation requirements by the end of this year, or that they had planned to enroll in. So that means credits that the student could have reasonably completed for terms not yet started as of the state of emergency, including credit recovery courses. So these could be indicated in their high school and beyond plan, in course registration records, or in a credit recovery plan that our counselors and success coordinators work with the students diligently on. If a course or credit bearing option had not yet started by February 29, students in Running Start, summer school, credit recovery, or like at Sequoia, some of their terms had not yet started, then the student's planned coursework can also count toward on track. And remember that on track to graduate means on track to graduate by August 31st. Go ahead to the next slide. OSPI has sent guidance for how we work with student learning during the time of closure. And this is not just for seniors, but for all students. Asking districts to check on student learning using a variety of strategies to provide feedback to students, to make instructional adjustments using those formative assessment results to reflect on instruction, determine next steps for student learning, and also to engage families, communicate with them, seek input from families about the assessment results to provide information about the next steps, and then also translations as necessary. And you'll see that there's some common themes here for those structures. The OSPI guidance and our structures really go together. District grading practices. We have provided guidance to teachers about grading practices, that the emphasis is on providing meaningful feedback to students to promote learning. The emphasis is not on grading. That student work exchanged during the school closure must be to the advantage of the student. They were getting a B in the class before closure, and then they turn in work, but it's not at the high level, that the teacher needs to be providing them feedback and opportunities to improve rather than having their grade go down during the closure. There are some circumstances where grading may be necessary to provide students access to graduation and post-secondary opportunities, and I'll talk about those in just a moment. And one of our guidelines is that the grades at the end of the semester should reflect student achievement both before the school closure as well as opportunities to demonstrate new learning since the closure. Here are some examples of when grades might be necessary or advantageous to students. For some students are in dual credit courses, either college in the high school courses or CTE dual credits, and pass-fail grading jeopardizes both the transferability of college credits and in some cases jeopardizes their access to financial aid or even their access to that college credit to begin with. For a CTE dual credit, for example, they need to have a C or higher in the course in order to transfer that college credit in order to earn the college credit. So pass-fail may not allow them to do that. Bridge to College Math is an example of a course where students who earn a B or higher are eligible to place directly into college credit-bearing college level courses when they go to college next year. So this is a senior level class, so a pass-fail may not get them that B or higher and that automatic placement into the college credit-bearing course. Specific courses, AP courses in ELA and math actually provide them access to those graduation pathways that used to only be done through testing. But this has to be, they can get that graduation pathway met provided that the student earns at least a C+ in the course in both semesters. And then for seniors in general, pass-fail grading may not reflect a student's level of achievement as they graduate and move to post-secondary opportunities. And we think specifically about students who may be going to highly selective colleges or may want eligibility for college athletics. So we've developed some grading options and guidance for seniors. So teachers can award them a letter grade, and notice that those letter grades do not go below a C. That would be the same or higher than the student's grade prior to the school closure. And we could offer either full or partial credit. They could also offer a non-numerical grade, a CR for credit, for either full or partial credit. Or if the student was not passing the class before and have not engaged for whatever reason, offer a non-numerical grade, an NC for no credit. And at that point, if we have worked to engage them in every way we possibly can, and they're a senior and we've offered all the different opportunities and they, for whatever reason, haven't been able to engage, that's when we would implement those state waivers. Washington's public and private four-year colleges are communicating the following, and they communicated this emphasis on the role and value of learning versus grading for both school districts and the universities and colleges. And they committed that students who complete high school coursework, and they were specific about that, it didn't necessarily include college in the high school, but anyone who receives a pass in lieu of a letter grade for high school coursework will not be negatively affected in the admission process. And our colleges in Washington will not recalculate a pass, no pass into numeric grade equivalents. Some colleges will take a pass and say, well, that's the minimum, so we're going to make it a 60% or a D. And they've committed that they're not going to do that for pass or credit grades that are earned this year in the spring. Go ahead to the next slide. Briefly on advanced placement, and I think you've been updated on this. Advanced placement is the College Board is going ahead with the exams. They will be administered at home. They're 45 minutes rather than the 3-hour sit down tests that they've had before. They will have 1 or 2 free response questions depending on the course. The exams are going to be limited to material that's covered by most teachers by early March. There are specific exam dates and there is a schedule, May 11th through the 23rd. There are makeups June 1st through 5th, but College Board is really asking that students take the exam May 11th through 23rd as scheduled in case something happens. So there is an opportunity for a makeup because June 1st through 5th will be the last chance they have to take the test. College Board is providing lots of resources for practice and preparation. Colleges and universities across the country have indicated support and will treat the scores as they have in the past. Different colleges treat the scores differently. Sometimes they offer college credit, sometimes it guarantees placement into certain courses, but they will do that as they have in the past. And if students choose not to take the exam because they don't feel prepared, there won't be any fee for the exam or for canceling the exam. And you can move ahead. And then for grading beyond seniors and those in dual credit courses, OSPI is developing guidance for that, which we expect to be published either later this week or early next week. And so we don't want to get ahead of OSPI's guidance on that, but what we expect both in the interim and as we move forward is that our emphasis will be on providing meaningful feedback to promote student learning and not specifically on grading.
Thank you, Dr. Woods. So just one celebration before we get into this section, and this is the end in the 2 or 3 slides here. The collaboration and the calibration and strengthening our strategies over the last 4 weeks has been remarkable among our cabinet, starting with our superintendent and the leadership he's provided and the access, frankly, that he's provided us on webinars across the state in making sure that we are on the front edge of new information and how to apply that new information into our strategy set. So kudos to the team, lots to celebrate, including these by the numbers on food distribution, childcare, and technology support. We served 6,300 meals during spring break. Since March 16th, we've served meals to 22,000 students for a total of 44,000, over 44,000 meals to date, which is remarkable. Kudos to Jeff and his team. We have 80 childcare spots available across 4 sites, and roughly about 20 student spots for children of first responders is the priority. And the YMCA consolidated 2 sites as more parents are staying home from work. So we are currently at Penny Creek and Whittier. And as people start to go back to work, we anticipate that they will open up more sites. They already have an expansion set to Jackson Elementary, Forest View, and Cedarwood. Boys and Girls Club continue to offer sites at their properties. Last week, we served 49 children out of the 80 spots in childcare. In terms of technology distribution, 4,500 Chromebooks for elementary schools went out across multiple distribution days for elementary, North, and Gateway. We already had 9,000 computers in the hands of students who were attending one-to-one schools, as it were, in secondary. We had 400 internet hotspots distributed in addition to the 400 that were already in use, and we have 200 more hotspots arriving this week. We also have additional Chromebook distribution to be coordinated at each school site this week in terms of having each school site take on the assessment of who would still like a Chromebook, who's in need, and hotspots as well. So that is turning more locally. in terms of the efficiency of being able to do that right out of the school building. Lastly, food pantries, and this didn't make it on the slide. Within the next week, we're working to move many of the food items remaining in the pantries in our schools from out of the school buildings and into the hands of local nonprofits for distribution for families in need. And some of our school pantries are already providing food to families in the way of, you've probably heard of the backpack programs and stuffing the backpacks on the weekends or for the weekends on a typical day. They're continuing to allow our nonprofit partners to distribute food from our properties without needing to enter the school buildings. So that is the end of our report, and we thank you very much.
Thank
Oh,
you.
I'm sorry. There is, sorry. Well, this was not a spoiler alert, and I did not plan to do this as this sort of pause here. This is what we were alluding to before on the remarkable participation of webinar attendance relative to these various high leverage technology tools that enhance the communication between teacher and student and allow them to more powerfully engage in those teaching and learning cycles. And you can see that these are numbers to date. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, all of you, for contributing. This has been a very helpful, at least to me, and concise pulling together of a lot of information that I, over the weeks, have seen in Friday reports and emails and that kind of thing. And it's just very helpful to have it all in one place and understand the continuity of it all. So I really appreciate that. I would like to ask directors if anyone has a question.
I do have questions, President Mason. If I may, I'd like to find out, I don't know if Brian or if Peter would know this number, but what are the costs for the devices that have been given out to the elementary school and middle school students? Are these devices that we had previously or that we had to purchase? And if we had to purchase them, how did they fit, or where do they fit in our budget for additional devices that we had to purchase?
The Chromebooks and so this was just a matter of making sure that the Chromebooks remaining in the buildings get distributed to those who express need. We have purchased the internet hotspots, and if Brian's on the line, he could give more detail about that if necessary. But we have purchased those internet hotspots.
Okay, so we just purchased the internet hotspots. We did a true statement.
Yeah, yes, that is correct, Director Lassane.
Okay, the other question that I have for Peter is you provided a nice elementary school and high school structure for their teachers and the families to view. Do we have the same type of structure outlined for kids in daycare or our KIT students or homeless students?
So those groups of students that you mentioned, Director Lassane, would be inclusive to these different structures here. We have a structure for preschool students in ECAP, in the ECAP program as well. We wanted to make sure that we were very clear with the family communication, that parallel communication with parents, to say that there are multiple ways and opportunities for students to be engaged in learning within those windows of time. But we, again, in that same spirit of minimizing any angst in the home that might exist or any extenuating circumstances like the ones you mentioned, is that this is a recommended schedule, and that we wanted them to know that they ultimately are the ones, the families will determine the schedule that works best for their family within those parameters. Do we have computers available for kids at Penny Creek and Whittier that are in daycare with either the YMCA or with Big Brothers Big Sisters? Go ahead, Brian.
Yes, we make those available to those on-site childcare facilities.
So they could take advantage of iReady or anything that the parent says, you know, you have time here during the day, we'll have time at home to do other things, but you can do like iReady, or you can do certain things while you're at daycare.
That's correct.
Thank you very much. One other question, if I may, Kathy, for OSPI's guidance that they have given, I know you cited for higher educations within the state of Washington. Have they provided any coordinations with higher educations outside of Washington? Because a large number of our students do go out of state for college.
Yeah, thank you for the question. We've been in most the colleges within the state of Washington got together and wrote a statement about what they would and would not do. And I know that the California system did the same, the Maine system did the same, so different state systems are doing that. But you know, they're all in different places, and some of the more highly selective schools haven't necessarily put that out. And that's one of the reasons we want to make sure that seniors have that opportunity to earn letter grades, because they very well may be applying to schools that don't have that same flexibility.
Very well, thank you.
Kathy, I
And
have a follow-on question, if I may, Dr. Lassane, on that topic. Has there been any discussion with courses that have an sort of end of course exam, like an AP exam, using the scores on those to assess letter grades for the class? So for example, if a student gets a 4 or 5 on an AP exam, would that be an A, in that class, or would that be demonstrating A-level work?
Yes, thank you. This is the first year. Usually we don't get the AP exam scores back until July.
So it'd be...
We do have a number of teachers that do tell students, if you get a 3, 4, or 5 on the exam, then I will, and you had a lower grade than an A in my class, I will do a grade change because you've demonstrated that. This year we have an interesting opportunity because for the first time ever, College Board is returning the exam questions and the students' responses to the teachers right after the exam window. And they say teachers may use that for a final exam. They won't know the score, but our teachers are pretty well trained in the rubrics. And so the College Board is allowing them to do that for the first time. So we have not yet had that conversation with the AP teachers to see if they're planning to do that. And of course, not every one of our students in an AP class takes an AP exam. So we'd want to make sure that there was something for the other students as well. But definitely there are practice exams and other kinds of things. So, and we are looking at other courses as well and seeing, is there an end of course type exam that we could give them that could show that they understand those essential learnings of that course.
Great, thank you.
that's all I had, Director Mason.
Oh, thank you. Do any other directors have questions?
I've got a couple of questions. I guess mine are they're a little bit all over the board. One is, do we know, I know we're not taking traditional attendance, but do we know what number of students aren't engaged right now? Like if you said, we've engaged with 50%, 60%, 70% of our students, do we have a number for that?
We have those anecdotally, and the principals are sort of the keepers of the running record based on their ongoing communications with their teachers. But we don't have any concrete quantitative data per school currently.
Okay, I'm just wondering what if there's some kiddos that are falling through the gaps, just to get an idea of what that would look like number-wise, like 10% of our kids we just haven't been able to reach, or so whatever that is. It'd be great if we could get something beyond the anecdotes on that one, just so we know what we're dealing with potentially for next year in terms of the the way the kids come back if they haven't been engaged with us for this many months.
Mhm.
The second question, I think, was basically the software is kind of a, I think probably a Brian question, but like so we've got all the Chromebooks and et cetera out, and I know that most times they do their updates at school with the school Wi-Fi. So with everything being at home, and I've been hearing anecdotally about a lot of crashes, I know we've had a lot of crashes, are these computers being able to be updated on people's personal Wi-Fi?
Yes, that's a great question. Yes, they can be, and we've tried to minimize the number of software updates so it's not bogging things down. So just the security updates are what students should be receiving on their and they can do that on their home network.
Okay, perfect. And then my last question is just kind of a thought I had about the AP exam and potential equity. It's my understanding that the foreign language AP is pretty much going to be given just 100% spoken, given the new environment or given the different environment. And so I just want to make sure that all of our kiddos have access to microphones, and I guess for those AP language teachers, just that they check in with their students to make sure they have the right devices and the right ability and even just the right space to take a test that's purely spoken.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. It is the College Board has made all of their tests, the questions that they ask, they're not knowledge based, and so they don't want them to be able to Google something because they're all open note. And so the only way to do that is by speaking. They have 2 questions that they will be speaking. They have not quite. Later this month they're supposed to give us what the specs are for the technology that they need, and I know that because I've had lots of questions from them. Our world language teachers, and Miss Organ being one of the most diligent ones of them, have been contacting me about those things, and they've been in close contact with their students, and as soon as we know, we will make sure that they have outreach. And if students don't have the right technology for any reason, College Board is actually reaching out as well and is helping to provide hotspots, Chromebooks, whatever technology they need.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I've got a 10th grader in AP French, and so we're just like making sure it's not going to crash at that, at that exact point.
And students are worried about the crashing, and that's why they want the students to take it during the original time so that there is still the makeup time if that were to happen.
And I guess just to follow on, are we making it really clear to parents and students that they can opt out of the test and get a full refund? Because that's the first I'm hearing of it. And so just so to relieve some of that anxiety and the cost, quite frankly. And so just like as a district, are we promoting that, saying, hey, this is an option to relieve some stress?
We have sent that information out, but we can probably do a better job. We're actually asking them not to make that decision too soon, because they may be more ready than they believe they are, and wait until they see some of the practice things. But absolutely. And some students have already contacted their schools and let them know that they want to cancel. But in order to cancel, all they have to do is not log in. They don't even have to tell the school.
Oh, nice.
Choose not to do it, and then we'll do a refund.
Oh, nice. That's perfect. Thank you so much.
Any additional questions?
Madam Chair, may I make a comment, please? Point of interest. Madam Chair?
Yes, please.
Okay. First of all, I'm speaking to the board and to the public right now. We couldn't do this work without the support of the board. But in 31 years of public education, I don't think anybody wakes up every day in public education and people just brag about education all the time, right? There's always scrutinies of the work. But this work was not done in an hour or 2 hours. And to the public, this is, the cabinet worked on this every Monday once we were notified about school closures. This is monumental work, and we have shared this with 7 other districts that are using our work. So nothing's perfect, but I again have to compliment the team on getting this out in a manner that is doable for everybody to understand, and services are being there for everybody. So it's important that you saw this tonight and that we are continuing to communicate it. But this is model work by outstanding people. We're in a people business and a kid business all in one, right? You have to rely on the people power to get this done. And this takes hours and hours and hours to do this. So to our public, our viewing public tonight, this is solid work. We continue to get better every day, but this is where we service our kids. And I will tell you that the Everett Public School District is not only a model in the region, but we have other places across the country asking us, how do we roll this out? Our communications department will put this on the webpage tonight so everybody can see it. But as shepherds of our work, to our board and to our community, please message this as well with us, because as we get better, this started at ground zero, and we're in a good place today. We'll be in a better place tomorrow. But I can't say enough about the support of the board, but also the great work of every member of the cabinet. People like Chad Golden that you may not even see tonight, how he gets that aftercare program. Dana Riley Black, Scott, Becky Clifford, the list just goes on. When they meet on Monday to get this done. So I just want to compliment them one more time. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, if there's no further questions or comments, I think we will move on with our meeting. Section 12.0 and section, which is unfinished business, and section 13.0 new business, there are no items to discuss this evening. So we will move on to section 14.0, which is our upcoming agenda items. As we know, we have had a very fluid meeting schedule given the lack of in-person meetings, but Dr. Salzman, can you please provide an overview of our next two meetings?
Yes, ma'am. At the April 28th special meeting, we'll discuss the following: Career and Technical Education Progress Report, Comprehensive Sexual Health Education Program. On meeting of May 5th, at that meeting, we'll discuss the following: High School College Career Life Readiness Indicators, Capital Bond Proposal Support, March Financial Report, Purchase and Sale Agreement, the Everett Public School Foundation donations, and Snohomish County right-of-way dedication.
Thank you. That did bring up a question I did have. Actually, I'm going to make it a comment, not a question, that I haven't heard any information as of yet what's happening to our summer internship program and some of those opportunities for students, which I know probably have been dramatically changed at this point. So we'll look forward to that update in the special meeting on April 28th.
Yes.
Okay, so that takes us to 15.0, which is an executive or closed session, and we do not have either this evening. So that takes us to section 16.0. Before I throw my fake gavel down, does anyone have a final comment? Okay, hearing none, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you everyone for being here tonight.
Be safe, everybody be safe.
Be safe. Nice to see everyone.